guys, welcome back to another video. Today I thought I would share my own personal story with hip dysplasia, and I'm just basically going to really open up about this and talk to you guys about how it affects my daily life and my gym routines. And then I'm also going to take you through a hip dysplasia friendly workout targeting the legs, especially the glutes, because I just want to show you guys how I basically adapt my workouts. And if you're someone who's also struggling with hip dysplasia or even hip pain, then I'd like to basically help you out and show you how to adapt your workouts in order to avoid pain. So I've just come back from the gym. It was a sweaty gym session. I did a leg day, mostly glute focused, so that's what I'm going to be taking you through. I'm a bit nervous to do this video actually. I don't usually get nervous to film, but today I'm nervous because this is a very personal story. This is something that I shy away from talking about, especially because I get worried and I have a fear of judgment, because I sometimes do get comments of people saying, but how can you lift heavy weights and say that you have pain at the end of the day? How can you do this and then say that you've got a hip condition? How can you go to the gym and say that you've got a invisible disability? It's really difficult sometimes because I often feel like I'm alone in my own journey. I often feel like I'm very misunderstood by people. And yeah, it is difficult, and I have good days and I have bad days, and unfortunately over the last week I've had more bad days than good days in terms of pain, but also mentally the effects of being in pain, they can take a mental toll. And I feel like it's really important for me to be completely open and honest about my own personal journey on my channel, because if I'm not honest, then it's all fake, isn't it? So that's just me being honest. I'm going to take you through my own story first and just tell you basically how I got here. So as you may know, I was diagnosed with hip dysplasia back in June of this year, 2023. So that was a massive, massive shock for me. I did not expect that diagnosis whatsoever. I've been having hip pain for around 9 years now. When I was 14, that's when the hip pain initially started, and I started getting pain in the left side of my hip. Thought it was muscular, obviously, thought I'd injured myself, and then it moved over to the right, and then I went in for an MRI. I did have cartilage tears on both sides of the hips. Now, what was unusual about this, and probably should have been picked up a bit sooner, was that the cartilage tears were in the exact same location on both sides of the hips. That is really unusual. That is not a normally occurring condition to have, is bilateral, they call them labral tears. We didn't have a great understanding of hip dysplasia back then. So I had keyhole surgery, both sides of my hips, and basically the cartilage tears were repaired and I have permanent sutures on both sides. That all happened when I was 16, 17, going into college. I was pain-free for about 6 years. And I'm talking absolutely no pain whatsoever. Last year, I noticed the twinge, and then it got worse and worse and worse. And by this point I'd moved GPs. I went to a totally different city because I was at university at this point. And I went back to the GP, I explained my history, I said I've had these operations on both sides. The orthopedic team said if I had any further issues, I need to come back to them. Said all of that. And at this point I was literally hobbling. I could barely walk. Even getting to the GP was so painful. I can't even describe the type of pain it is. It's like a gnawing pain in both of the hips. So every single step was really, really painful. And I hobbled into the GP room in this new city. And I explained everything, explained that I'd had surgeries, explained that the orthopaedic team said to see me again if I had any further pain, and yeah, she basically pied me off. She basically said that orthopaedic surgeons always say that. They always say, come and see us again if you have any further issues, and that a x-ray on my hips wouldn't be worth the risk because of radiation, and in order to refer me to orthopaedics I would have to have an x-ray, and she said, I don't think it's worth it. I was literally in such shock. Like, there I am with a diagnosed condition of labral tears at the age of 23 on both sides, having so much pain I could barely walk, and a doctor is telling me that I can't see the orthopaedic surgeons again. That was one of the lowest points of this whole journey, is trying to convince my GP to send me back to orthopaedics. And also trying to ask for pain relief. Like, literally, to even get pain relief was absolutely terrible. So I started off taking naproxen, did nothing, absolutely nothing. Went back to the GP and I said, look, I'm really struggling here. I've got a lot of pain. Like, at this point I was a medical student on placement. I was basically saying I can't walk on placement and it's affecting my studies. So she gave me a toricoxib, which is basically a pain relief that targets arthritic-like pain. So it targets the arthritic type joints, if you like, and basically reduces inflammation. I tried it and it worked, and I was like, thank God, this is amazing. Like, I've actually got something that helps me, a pain relief that helps me, because that's never happened to me before. And I said, look, I want to see orthopaedics. I want to. Like, I feel like something's wrong here. This shouldn't be happening after I've had surgery. I think I've got a further tear in the cartilage. So eventually orthopaedics, and thank God because I saw an amazing consultant who was absolutely brilliant, and he was basically specialised in young adult hip pain, which is who I should have seen in the very first place, really, because I was a young adult with hip pain. And he said, there's one of two things going on here. I don't think you've got further labral tears. I think you've either got a congenital condition, which is a condition that you're born with. I think you've either got hip impingement or you have hip dysplasia. And the difference between those two conditions and how you manage them is absolutely, they're worlds apart, basically. Hip impingement is a simple operation where you basically shave off the excess bone. It's caused by an extra growth of bone around the hip joints, which basically means every time that you move the joint it's getting stuck. Hip dysplasia means that your hips are too shallow, okay? So they're absolutely worlds apart in terms of how you manage them. I felt deeply in myself that I had hip impingement, because I thought, you know what, I've always struggled with squatting. That would be one of the signs, is basically feeling like you have a lack of range of motion while squatting. And I thought, it's got to be hip impingement, like it all makes sense. I have clicky hips, and yeah. I had further MRI scans with contrast, and then I also had a 3D CT scan of both hips. Because my x-rays looked normal, they wanted the 3D CT scan in order to determine whether I had any dysplasia. They wanted to see how basically well covered my hip joint is. MRI showed no further labral tears, which was great, but the CT showed that I did have hip dysplasia, and I had it on both sides, mostly anteriorly. So if you've got your hip joint, you've got your socket and you've got the ball. Basically my socket is too shallow, so it doesn't properly support the ball of the hip joint, which basically just means when I walk, run, basically any transfer of weight, when you move your foot up and down onto the floor, means that shock usually comes all the way up the hips, and your hips usually absorb that. My hips do not absorb it as well as a normal person. So my hips were too shallow. I had mainly over the anterior, so the front part of the hip joints, but also the posterior of my hip joints were borderline shallow. So they were normal in the normal ranges, but only by a couple of percentages. So when I heard you've got hip dysplasia, I thought, right, I know the surgery, I know what has to happen. I'm going to have a massive operation on both sides in order to fix this, and I'm not going to be in any pain anymore. Boy, was I wrong. He turned around and basically said, because the posterior is in the lower end of the range of normal, we can't do the normal operation, because if we were to tilt, which is what they do, tilt the pelvis forward so you've got that anterior coverage, you would then have issues with the posterior coverage, and basically we would be solving one issue but creating another. So he said it's inevitable that you're going to have total hip replacements, likely by the age of 40, because you're going to have severe arthritis, and this is something that's going to get worse and worse. The only thing we can do now is basically control your hip pain, keep the muscles around the hip joints strong so that basically it supports the hip more. And the only other thing we can do for the pain is cortisone injections, but we can't do that yet because we need to save that for later on when things get really bad. And yeah, I remember just coming out of that appointment and just crying. I burst into tears, and I just couldn't believe that this was going to be the rest of my life, basically. Like, the rest of my young life, I'm going to be totally limited by this. And it was a really tough couple of months to actually just come to terms with the fact that I had a disability. And yeah, there's just a lot of mental challenges to that, to looking like you're fit and healthy, but actually something's going on underneath. And at the beginning it was really difficult because I had no idea how to manage myself. I had no idea how to look after myself. My mind was like, you know, a young adult, but my body felt like an 80-year-old woman. So having to balance like enjoyment of life with my body and the limits of my body was really, really difficult. And having to pluck up the courage to explain to people at work, like, I need to sit down, I can't walk very far, I can't do this, I can't do that, like a regular junior doctor, was really difficult. And I had to actually come to terms with the fact that I had to go part-time as well. So there was a lot of mental challenges, and if there is anyone out there with hip dysplasia, I totally understand where you are right now, and it's really, really rubbish. It's really crap, because this is something that actually can be prevented. What I didn't know initially was that when I was a baby and I had my first exam with the GP, all babies go through this exam. They basically test the hips, and if the hips are clicky, you're meant to have a cast put on in order to prevent hip dysplasia from happening. So I had clicky hips and they didn't give me a cast, because my dad remembers them saying that I had clicky hips. So all of this could have been prevented, which makes it feel even worse. And yeah, but do you know what? You can't do anything about it, and that's all in the past, and you've just got to focus on now and moving forward. So I've had to make a lot of adaptations to the gym. It's not been easy. I've had to reevaluate things a lot. I've had to really listen to my body and get in tune with my body. Yeah, it's not been easy. But you know what? It's fine. And I'm not going to let it stop me doing what I love. Because gym, if you've seen my channel and you understand this about me, gym is my life, and it's given me back so much. It's actually taken some of the pain away, because by exercising, moving the joints, I'm actually lubricating the joints more and making sure that I'm reducing the pain, and also building the muscles around the hips is going to help with taking that burden off of the hip joints. So it's really important to me. And yeah, so I'm going to show you my glute focus workout today. Basically, because I have anterior hip dysplasia, that means that I can't do full extension exercises. So for example, a hip thrust, which I used to love to do, because that basically puts the load onto the anterior of the hip joint, I can't do hip thrusts. And yeah, I can do a couple of extension exercises, but they're limited mainly to dumbbells. So a lot of my glute session is flexion based, and I'll talk about the exercises that I'm doing and basically why I've had to do that. If you have posterior hip dysplasia, then unfortunately flexion exercises are what you can't do, and you're going to have to focus more on anterior. So I hope that makes sense. But yeah, so hopefully this helps anyone out there with hip dysplasia or generally just hip pain. So anyway, so I'm going to go through my workout now. I've just got it on my laptop down here. So this was a really good workout, not gonna lie. So starting off with dynamic stretching. So this is really important to warm up the muscles before jumping right into strength training. We want to make sure that our muscles are ready for us to take load. So I love to do leg swings. That just really opens up my hip flexors, which are tight areas for me. And then I like to do lateral leg swings as well. Again, it opens up the muscles on the side of the glutes. And then obviously repeat it on each side. I think I did about 30 seconds of each on each side here. And then deep squat, this is another one that I absolutely love. I like to move around into the deep squat. And then I like to go into a deep squat to extension. That just really stretches out my glutes and hamstrings, basically in order for me to warm up a bit more. And a deep squat is also really good for the hip flexor muscles. Again, this is just another stretch that I love to do. Again, opening up those hip flexors, but also warming up our upper body as well. Okay, first compound. So this is a staple in my workout. It is a sumo deadlift. So I can't do hip thrusts, so I substitute this with a sumo deadlift because you're still working your glutes. So feet should be further than shoulder width apart. Toes should be pointing out. We're going to put one hand over the bar, one under. This is a warm-up weight for me, so I'm just seeing how I feel. And basically we're going to squat down, grab the bar, pull back the shoulder blades, keeping our back straight. All we need to do is lift that bar up. So we're not moving it with our back, we're trying to move it with our legs, okay? So yeah, I like to just try with my warm-up weight to really control the weight and bring it all the way down to the bottom slowly. And when you come up from a sumo squat, please, please, please don't thrust your hips forwards. That is going to cause a lot of lower back pain, and yeah, it's just not worth it. And then this is me going to a heavier weight. So with compounds, I like to use it like a pyramid set. So I basically increase the weight but lower the reps. So I think with my working sets, I usually do about 6 reps. And I did this with a superset with a dumbbell bridge. Bridges are really good for glute workouts if you can't do full extension movements, because we are basically eliminating the load on the hips slightly by making sure that our feet and knees are up. Yeah, and then this is me just going into another working set, and this is like my heaviest sumo deadlift weight. Now we're going into a unilateral movement, which is really important for symmetry. This is another good one because I can't do regular lunges because it causes too much extension on the non-working side. But by raising my leg onto a bench, I'm actually eliminating the load on the extension of the other hip. So Bulgarian split squats are a really good alternative for me, and they really burn, like they really do hit the glutes. When using Bulgarian split squats, you want to slightly lean forward, make sure that your leg is quite far back, whereas if your leg is more forward, you're targeting your quads. And then Smith machine sumo squat. I love this exercise. I've just gotten into it for the last few weeks, but by making sure your feet are wider than shoulder width apart, toes pointed out, and also by pulling your feet slightly forward from the bar, you're targeting your booty more. So this is a really good exercise. And I do struggle with depth with my hip dysplasia, so just go to what is kind of comfortable for you. Don't push yourself too far. You shouldn't be feeling any pain during these exercises, so just go to your normal range of motion that's comfortable for you. Dumbbell RDLs, I love this exercise as well. This is a great one. So essentially, yeah, you're just going to hold the dumbbells, feet should be shoulder width apart, and as you lean forward, you're pulling back with your booty, and then slight bend in the knee, and you should feel it in your glutes. And I really feel this exercise in my glutes. It's really good because I'm not basically putting any stress on the front part of my hips at all. And then a sumo squat with dumbbell, again, another one that I absolutely love. Very similar to how we do the Smith machine, but you're holding the dumbbell in between your legs. And again, please go to a range of motion that's comfortable for you. If you are in any pain when you're doing your exercises, then you really need to think out what causes that pain and basically adapt to it. And then finally, I know I said it was a glute day, but I love to add just one quad exercise onto a glute day, just to make sure it's fully legs, you know, a leg press. So for me, I'm just doing a normal stance leg press, and my back is completely straight against the bench. That's really important. You're just going to bring your knees towards you and push back using your heel mostly. So we don't want to be pushing with our toes, we want to be pushing with our heel. And yeah, so that is my glute focused leg workout. I hope you enjoyed that workout. But the key things to take away are that if you have anterior hip dysplasia, you need to be focusing more on flexion-based exercises. If you have posterior, then you need to be focusing on extension-based exercises. Just learning what the difference is between extension and flexion is really important. So I'd say like go away and have a look at that. And also only work within the limits of your pain. If an exercise is causing you pain, you need to stop. And I'm not talking about just strain in terms of, you know, when you're pumping your muscles and it's really, really tough. I'm talking about actual physical sharp pain. So it's taken a long time for me to find what works for me and a lot of experimentation. I'd say just give it a go. What can go wrong? You're in pain for one day and then the next day everything's okay again. You know, so just keep going, and you can do this. Like, don't let it stop you doing what you love, like me. You just got to power through it. And honestly, if you do start exercising with hip dysplasia, I can guarantee that you're going to feel better actually, because you're moving the joints. And yeah, so I hope this has been a good video, and I hope it's allowed you to get to know me a bit better. And yeah, I'm happy I've opened up. I am. I was nervous, but I'm really happy that I've done this video because I think it's really important to share my experiences with people. And also limit walking. I used to actually do like incline walking quite a lot, but I don't even do that anymore now because it's just too much for me on top of work. And I actually try to keep a diary of how many steps cause me pain, and by doing that then I know kind of what my limit is, and I just check on my health app on my Apple phone, and basically yeah, just keep a brief diary. I know that my limit at the moment is about 8,000 steps. After that I tend to get quite intense pain, so it's just learning what your body can take basically. But I hope you've enjoyed this video, and yeah, thank you for watching guys, it means so much. I'll see you later.